Hi, hey, hello. It is I, the real main event, the rogue soldier, but more importantly than that, I am the essential John L. Crossfire, and today you are going to be caught in the crossfire, but we will be caught in conversation. So without further ado, let's do this. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of the podcast, episode 14. A lot of podcasts don't actually make it past 10 or 11 episodes, so I'm chalking this up to a win. Hopefully I can think of something, special to do for next week's episode, but regardless, hopefully we can keep, all the momentum going, and even more so, I hope that with you guys' help, I can keep building this up into a legitimate podcast, legitimate talk show, and eventually go on to have guests, make some waves. It's a long shot, but hopefully we can get there. But before that, straight off the bat this week, Cruella is now free to all Disney Plus subscribers as of the 27th of August. So if you still haven't seen it, and really, if you haven't, why not? But now is your chance nonetheless. You can bet your ass that I will most definitely be giving it another watch. Hell, I'm probably going to give it multiple watches along with Mrs. Crossfire because it was dope AF and we loved every second of it, and I still stand by my original statement of when I first mentioned it here on the podcast of when we first watched it, that I still think that it is in the running for film of the year. But speaking of movies, myself and Mrs. Crossfire went on a bit of a movie kick this week. We watched Vacation Friends and Playing with Fire, both starring John Cena respectively. Vacation Friends is definitely one for the adults. Playing with Fire, though, is one for the entire family. We watched them back to back, so it was actually quite the contrast there. Vacation Friends was by far my favorite of the two. The comedy was it was absolutely freaking stupid, but it was right up my alley. Absolutely ridiculous, but very, very funny nonetheless. In mine and Mrs. Crossfire's opinion, we enjoyed it quite a lot. The final episode of Monsters at Work was an absolute emotional roller coaster, and although it did have closure with the ending, no spoilers though, I still need more. Send a memo to the mouse. Episode 4 of Marvel's What If was an emotional roller coaster times 2. It was what if Doctor Strange lost his heart instead of his hands. Basically, he loses the love of his life, Christine, and no matter what he does when he goes back in time, her death is straight up, it's set in stone, and he goes down a very dark path in an attempt to bring her back, despite finding out this, and finding out, that her death must be part of the timeline. There is a lot of, timeline shifting and twists and turns, and I don't want to spoil, the main plot point, but damn, it got interesting real fast, and damn, did it get good. Although, spoiler alert, it did have a pretty fucking depressing ending, but it was awesome. Probably my favorite episode of the series so far, just beating out episode 2 with the T'Challa one. But yeah, it was really, really good. Paul Stanley of Kiss fame has actually been diagnosed with COVID-19 this week, causing their concerts to be postponed for the near future. Anyone that knows me knows that I'm a huge Kiss fan, with Paul Stanley's Star Child persona being my favorite of the bunch, and low-key somewhat of an inspiration of my own persona in the sensational Leslie Johns that may or may not still end up coming to fruition, but obviously it's going to be a non-wrestling capacity, but I'm working on some things, in my head at least. Hopefully I can project them into the universe. Regardless, sending all my well wishes to Paul Stanley. This is the third of some of my favorite, celebrities being diagnosed with COVID, the other two being Gabriel Iglesias and Corey Taylor. Now, obviously, those two have since bounced back due to the fact that they were both vaccinated beforehand. And given that Paul Stanley is, so fit for his age, like, if I'm half as fit at the age, when I get to his age as he is, I will be happy, because that'll be twice as fit as I am right now, let's be honest. But I'm sure he'll be fine. But the reason I'm bringing this up is, this is, proof that it can happen to anyone. Literally anyone. Like, this could be you or your loved one next. Like, just do the right thing, people. Like, a lot of people, they're just reading, what they see on social media or whatever, instead of listening to the actual health professionals, and it's just getting ridiculous. Like, just imagine, if it was you or someone you love, and they may not be so lucky to bounce back. Like, I don't want to come across as a dick, and I don't want to harp on this, but just get vaccinated if you can. Wear a mask, social distance. Like, it's not going to cease up straight away. Like, that's the whole point. It's a fucking pandemic, but can certainly minimize it, which is a start. And that's all I'm going to say on that, because I don't want to go too deep into it, get too political, and quite frankly, it's fucking depressing. But just stay safe out there, yo. Just please stay safe. Use your common sense. Use your fucking brain. Well wishes to Paul Stanley, and I want everyone else to stay safe. Does that make sense? Makes sense. Over in wrestling, myself and Mrs. Crossfire watched the first 3 of the 8 WWE Legends documentary series that was originally aired on A&E. SBS On Demand actually has all 8 episodes for us Australian viewers. The first one focused on Stone Cold Steve Austin. What? And although his story has been told, quite a few times, and that's being generous, it's been told a lot of times, but this may still have been the best one yet. They touched on, his family life and stuff like that, which in the past he has been a bit more private about in his specials. So it was good to see him open up about that kind of stuff. And it was good to take even for example, the match he had at WrestleMania 19 with The Rock, they gave another look at that. And, they basically just retold the story. But at the same time, they gave you kind of like a better look into it, if that makes sense. The second one focused on Rowdy Roddy Piper, which went way deeper into the life of Piper than anything else I've ever seen him on. Very emotional, but very well done. Just when you think you got the answers, I change the questions. Love the Hot Rod, one of my all-time favorites. The third one was Macho Man Randy Savage, and honestly, I wasn't a fan. Like, I may be biased because, Macho Man is my second favorite wrestler of all time, but Randy's brother Lenny Poffo actually went on record and said that upon seeing the finished product, he himself actually wished he hadn't been a part of it. And I 100% agree. Like, maybe, as I said, I'm being biased, but the way I saw it through my eyes, and Mrs. Crossfire said the same thing as well, though, it just came across as an absolute smear campaign. Like, we had the Dark Side of the Ring episode on him and Miss Elizabeth, and even that didn't vilify him to the extent that this did, in my opinion. And the fact that, Bubba the Love Sponge got so much airtime was just disgraceful to begin with. And Hulk Hogan was he looked like he was just deflecting something chronic in this. Like, you could just see it through his body language. And I look forward to seeing the Ultimate Warrior version of this one in the series and see how honest they were about his life or not, because on the surface, the company celebrates Ultimate Warrior a lot more than they do Macho Man. And I don't want to speak ill of the dead here, but when you look at, Macho Man, certainly he has his flaws. But Warrior, to a lot of aspects, to a lot of people, he just came across as a straight-up scumbag. And, you can say apples and oranges, but it still doesn't make sense to me, why they went down that path. Like, towards the end of the Macho Man one, there was still a lot of people saying, about, the effect that he left on the business and this and that, but overall, it still just left a really bad taste in my mouth. And as I said, Mrs. Crossfire's as well, and she's not even as familiar with Macho Man as I and other fans are, but it just felt really off. It felt unneeded, it felt unnecessary, but I guess what's done is done. Over in Ring of Honor, last week on Ring of Honor TV, because I didn't get a chance to cover it in time for last week's episode, Roxy and Miranda Alizé advanced into the Ring of Honor Women's World Championship Tournament. This week on Ring of Honor TV, Angelina Love and Trish Adora advanced in the tournament. The semifinals will take place this coming week after this episode drops on Ring of Honor TV, with Roxy versus Angelina Love and Miranda Alizé versus Trish Adora. So one of these 4 women will be crowned the very first Women's World Champion at Death Before Dishonor. I personally wouldn't mind seeing Roxy versus Miranda Alizé in the finals. I feel like that would be a money match. Mrs. Crossfire is strongly behind Trish Adora to go all the way and get the victory. I'm not fussed who wins. I kind of don't want it to be Angelina just because, with all due respect to her, she's been around for a while, so she does deserve it. But at the same time, that means she's also had her, she's had her time in the sun, so to speak. So I'm hoping that, one of these up-and-coming women gets a chance, to have some spotlight and grow from there. I've said before in the past that I think Miranda Alizé has a very bright future, so I wouldn't mind seeing her go all the way. She's my prediction, but I could easily see Trish Adora or Roxy or, Angelina. Any of these four women can easily be seen as the Ring of Honor World Women's Champion. Over on SmackDown this past week, or last week when this drops, as always, SmackDown along with Impact will be a week behind by the time the pod airs, just because of the recording schedule. But what else can I do? WWE made a feeble attempt, I cannot stress that enough, at trying to make Becky Lynch become a cowardly heel / opportunist type character, I guess, similar to her husband or even, Edge. Of course, her husband is Seth Rollins. But the fans were still cheering her, and to be honest, I feel like they're most likely going to continue to do so. Like, when you keep in mind the height of Becky's, popularity skyrocketed in the first place off the back of a failed heel turn. So, in saying that, maybe that's what WWE's trying to do. They're trying to swerve us, and they want to try and pull that thing again to have her as like an anti-hero type, but we'll have to wait and see. Bianca Belair won a number one contenders match. Surprise, surprise. That's obvious sarcasm, by the way. To face Becky Lynch, and the way they've done it makes you think that they're 100%, they want Bianca as the face in the situation. She challenged Becky, and Bianca was just like, nah. Which, again, trying to be a heel, but the fans cheered for that when Becky walked away, so hopefully this doesn't backfire too much. But regardless, I am looking forward to the feud. I mean, as I said last episode, these are two of the best women, of all time. And they have all the potential in the world to have a 5-star match, if they want to. I mean, hell, both of these women are two of, the handful of women to actually main event a WrestleMania. Of course, Becky main evented WrestleMania at WrestleMania 35, along with Ronda Rousey and Charlotte Flair. And of course, Bianca main evented night 1 of WrestleMania this year, of course, against Sasha Banks, who was the women's champion at the time. And according to Dave Meltzer, so take that with a grain of salt, but apparently, though, the heel turn was actually Becky's idea to start with. So hopefully she can get a bit of, leeway to do her thing so that she can get booed. But I still don't see her getting booed overall anytime soon, though. I still think that she's going to be more of an anti-hero or a tweener, at least. Speaking of heel turns, we got a further tease of Dominic Mysterio turning heel. Rey Mysterio said to Dominic that he's going to let him go shine on his own, give him his own spotlight. But Dom got way too cocky in his match, and as a result, he suffered a loss to Sami Zayn, which Rey wasn't happy about. I was talking to Mrs. Crossfire about this, and we both think it'd be a nice swerve if they actually somehow managed to turn Rey heel on Dominic instead. But I still feel they should have done that heel turn at SummerSlam regardless, but at the same time, I do like that they can stretch this out, because hopefully they can stretch it out long enough so that they can have a one-on-one match at WrestleMania, perhaps, with Rey's mask or, career or both on the line. Over on Raw, Damian Priest, Drew McIntyre, and Sheamus had a very good triple threat match for the WWE United States Championship. Of course, Damian Priest retained the title there. Doudrop destroyed, she Doudropped her, like she said she was going to do. Doudrop destroyed Eva Marie before their match could even begin. Doudrop mocked Eva Marie after the fact. The Miz was unavailable for his match against John Morrison, so John Morrison's opponent instead was the Giant Omos, and of course Omos picked up the victory, absolutely dominating John Morrison. Over on NXT, Kaylee Ray had a really good backstage promo. Her promos are severely underrated, in my opinion. I don't know if it's just the accent or her facials or what it is, but she's really good at promos. Drake Maverick has a new tag team partner, and it's Grayson Waller. Yes! Making his official in-ring debut for NXT Unfortunately, Grayson did take the loss. He took the pin in the loss to Imperium, but I want them to keep this pair going. They're like a little odd couple. Big pop. Johnny Gargano had Index, of course, Indy Hartwell, Dexter Lumis, in his corner for his match against LA Knight, which was just absolutely hilarious. The entrance that they did had me chuckling from the get-go. It was actually a pretty good match between LA Knight and Johnny Gargano, as if anyone was expecting anything less. Dexter Lumis accidentally cost Johnny the match after initially helping him out. Dexter helped him. They went to high five, and then because they went to high five, LA Knight was able to hit his finisher. 1, 2, 3. So, be interesting to see where that goes. I'm hoping that, now that, Candice LeRae is pregnant and, Austin Theory is going up to the main roster, of course, he's been doing dark matches, that we actually get somewhat of a pairing between, Johnny Gargano and Dexter Lumis. Like, I love the odd couple pairings. And at this point, Johnny Gargano, he's done just about everything he can. So, putting him in the tag division with a Dexter Lumis to kind of, hopefully, get Dexter Lumis maybe even a tag team title reign wouldn't be a bad idea, at least in my opinion. Over on Impact, the highlight from Impact's Emergence special for me were the opening match between Rohit Raju and Matt Cardona. They had a very good match. The fans in the Impact Zone were solidly behind Cardona. Rohit did a great job of controlling the pace of the match. Cardona still does very well for himself as an underdog-type babyface, which is kind of strange to see at this point now, given the way that he's absolutely killing it outside Impact, in GCW as a mega heel, as the current, GCW heavyweight champion. He actually just had a custom title made. And if you haven't seen it, go check it out on his Instagram because he's just trolling all of the fans at this point. I love it. He's got Velcro on the strap. He added a spinner. It's good stuff. I loved it. He actually just cosplayed at their last GCW show as Do-Rag Vince McMahon when Vince McMahon was the ECW champion, which popped this shit out of me. Again, he's doing such a great job. He's just trolling the hardcore fans, and I love every second of it. But back to the Impact event here. Cardona picked up the win with radio silence after Rohit was distracted. Both Mrs. Crossfire and I popped for the post-match shenanigans because Shira, of course, Rohit's bodyguard, attacked Cardona, but then Cardona's fiance would get in the ring to, check on Matt / the Tersh you're away. And the fans were actually chanting, "Chelsea's gonna kill you," at Rohit and Shira, which they actually backed off at, which was kind of funny. Some good stuff there. Positive example of why having fans back can make it better. And this was actually proven even further in the next match when, during an 8-person tag match, Rosemary and Tasha Steelz were in the ring, and the Impact Zone were chanting, "Bite her face off." Of course, Rosemary has a demon, monster-type persona. The Fatal 4-Way number 1 contenders match between Ace Austin, Moose, Chris Sabin, and Sami Callihan, where the winner would get a shot at the Impact World title, was pretty dope. Lots of moving parts, and it went, from 0 to 100 real quick, but honestly, I don't think anyone was expecting anything less. Like, when you look at the guys involved, the fact that, there's a guaranteed world title shot on the line, you expect it to be, a balls to the wall type of match. You've got your balls to the wall, man. The fans were behind, all the competitors at different points of the match, respectively. Everyone got their shit in at different points, but it still wasn't oversaturated at the same time, so everyone was able to get, their shine, if you will. Still not a fan of every, big match, so to speak, having, everyone kick out of finishes, but it is what it is. I did really like the finish, though, where Sami Callihan got a desperation chair shot on Moose, and then Ace Austin was able to steal the victory by stacking Moose up with a roll-up, keeping everyone looking strong, brother. All the while shining a light on Ace Austin as a young up-and-coming talent, and still getting him over as, a slimy, sneaky little son of a bitch. Brian Myers cut a short yet good backstage promo hyping up himself versus Christian Cage in the main event. The X Division Championship match between Jake Something and current champion Josh Alexander was an absolute slugfest. Alexander popped off 10 German suplexes in a row, and kept his grip the entire time. Very impressive given the size difference, especially when you look at how big, just tall and muscly. Like Jake something is just a unit. Like, I feel Jake something probably should have been counted out after he took the pile driver on the apron, but I did like how they played it off. He got back in the ring, but he was semi-out on his feet. Alexander hits a second one in the middle of the ring. 1, 2, 3, retains the X Division Championship. Trey Miguel attempting to do Melina's splits in the mixed tag team match. He pulled his groin attempting to do it. Gave me a little chuckle. He also referenced the old Ready to Rumble movie with David Arquette randomly in the match. He did a double axe handle and he shouted, "I will rule you." Gave me a little chuckle. Gave Mrs. Crossfire a chuckle as well. Of course, if you haven't seen Ready to Rumble, you should go check it out. Like, super bloody cheesy. Came out in like 2001, but it's pretty awesome. Brian Myers versus Christian Cage in the main event of this Impact Emergence pay-per-view special, whatever you want to call it, was a very well-paced match, much like I expected. Christian chopped Myers all around ringside, getting the fans into it, getting the fans up close and personal. But of course, Myers picked his spots and eventually took control with the fans solidly behind the champion Christian Cage. Christian was hammering down on Myers with both right and left hands, and D'Lo Brown on commentary made a point of explaining double fisting. So that got me pretty good. I don't know if that was D'Lo's intention, but it made me laugh. Myers got a very close near fall with a spear near the end. Matt Stryker on commentary did a very great job of telling the story behind that move. Then once again with the finish when Christian hit a spear of his own before hitting up the victory by pinfall after hitting the kill switch / I'm prettier. Call it what you want. Overall, it was a pretty good show. Even the matches that I didn't just go down in the highlights were pretty good. Didn't really have any bad on it, that I could pick out, off the top of my head. Over on Impact TV, Eddie Edwards and Sami Callihan further tease becoming a team. Just do it already, damn it. Speaking of teams, though, Chris Bay and Jay White have challenged the Good Brothers for the Impact World Tag Team Championships, so that should be interesting provided the Good Brothers accept the challenge. Your song of the week this week, we have the most recent drop in their Fight the Good Fight project, and of course I'm referring to Citizen Soldier and their new song Empty Cup. It dropped just yesterday upon recording this podcast, and like all of the other songs in this project, it's a straight up banger. Go give it a listen on their YouTube channel, Spotify, wherever it is you get your music. Again, that song is Empty Cup by Citizen Soldier. Seriously, don't underestimate it when I say it's a banger. Over in wrestling news, NXT has a new logo set to be debuting soon. It's a 90s style graffiti with like paint splatter, and despite what AEW fans want you to believe, it's not a rip-off of the AEW Dynamite logo. Of course, the AEW Dynamite logo is a reference to the Indian Color Festival, so AEW don't actually own that, even if it was a rip-off, which it's not. I do very much prefer the old logo, especially the one they have now while recording this, where it has like the skull with the wings on it. It gives it like an old school, rock kind of vibes. But I actually do like the new one. People are losing their mind saying, it's too kid-friendly, pro wrestling is dead, it's all just sports entertainment, blah, blah, blah. Well, I've said it before that if you think being kid-friendly is what's ruining wrestling, then that's a you problem, because some of the greatest wrestling moments have been in a PG setting. And on top of that, as I've said before as well, and I'll say it until I'm blue in the face, pro wrestling is sports entertainment. They're not exclusive. It does worry me, though, to an extent. I do see where people are coming from, because this new project, or I guess new era of NXT, will reportedly be headed by Vince McMahon and Bruce Pritchard. And I feel having Bruce Pritchard, as the head writer, head creative for all three shows is too much for one person to handle. So I'm hoping it doesn't become too much the same as Raw and SmackDown, because the main roster, NXT technically is the main roster, but doesn't get presented as such all the time. But, the main roster has, super cringy stories, at least in comparison to NXT. So I'm hoping NXT doesn't become too silly. In saying that, if it does go the same way, as a SmackDown rather than a Raw, it'll still do just fine. Of course, SmackDown, as over the top and hokey as it can be at times, SmackDown still does focus on, the wrestling side of things more than Raw. But people need to remember that at the end of the day, this isn't a wrestling show. It's a television show focused around wrestling. The wrestling shows are the pay-per-view/special events. And even then, you've still got to have some hokiness to keep the casual fans, invested in coming back. But as far as the new logo goes, and I for one think that it's going to look super bitchin' on a t-shirt, especially if they go like, a psychedelic tie-dye type stuff. Maybe that's just me. People have told me I don't have very good fashion sense, but I can easily see it on like a blue, like acid wash t-shirt. I'd wear the shit out of it. According to the dirt sheet, so take it with a grain of salt, Vince McMahon himself was more angry backstage at this week's Raw than he has been in quite some time at how lazy the writers have been. So that's going to be funny if it is true, because it completely contradicts all of the people that, go on social media and say that Vince is out of touch and this and that. But yeah, just a nice little tidbit I saw from the dirt sheets that I thought was worth mentioning. Fightful are reporting that WWE are going to split WrestleMania into 2 nights, just like they did the last 2 WrestleManias. We just need to wait for WWE to confirm this, if it is true, but Fightful have been known to be a fairly reputable source in the past. This does kind of disappoint me in a way, because although I understand why they do it for a variety of different reasons, I just think that WrestleMania should be one night, one big shebang. Like, yes, having 2 nights, it gets more people on the show, people aren't as limited, for time for their matches, and it saves having a 7 or 8 hour show in one sitting, hell, even 9 maybe if you include, the 2-hour pre-show. But being the be-all, end-all of professional wrestling, sports entertainment, I feel like it should be one night, though, like with the guys and girls working their asses off all year, to earn a spot on the card. Like, it's something to work for, something to look forward to. And yeah, the people that don't actually make it to the card, they might be disappointed, and rightfully so, but they're still going to be there in person to experience it. And along with everything else that comes, with WrestleMania, from the event itself to the week leading up to it with all the fan events and the Hall of Fame, etc., etc., like, you can quite easily have a 5-hour show tops, if you have an hour-long pre-show and then have, the actual card go for 3.5 hours to 4 hours long. Perhaps, 4 hours, because it is the show. Obviously, in the last few years, the event has, just gotten bigger and bigger with the major stadiums that, it's taken place in. But look at some of the older WrestleMania events, a lot of which are still looked back on in a lot of fondness, and it's not all just nostalgia. Like, they're 3 hours of pure action, and it still very much comes across as the grandest stage of them all. But yeah, I think for all of that I was mentioned, if that made sense to you guys, I feel like having an extra night is unnecessary, especially when you've already got the Hall of Fame, as I said. You've got the NXT takeovers, you've got all the fan access events, you've got the Raw After Mania, which has become a very big deal in the last, 10 years or so. So you don't want to oversaturate it. And, because there is so much happening, it can almost get, exhausting for everyone involved, whether it's from a fan or a talent perspective. But that's just me. That's my reasoning. That's why I think it should only be one night. Maybe you disagree, but yeah. The big news this week is that Adam Cole, baby, is officially a free agent. It will be interesting to see where he goes. People say that AEW is the obvious choice, but I could honestly see him going absolutely anywhere in wrestling in terms of promotions, but you never know. He may even show up at All Out this weekend upon recording this. Who knows? Of course, All Out will actually air the day after this podcast drops, so keep our eyes peeled. And also, while recording this, the non-compete clauses from the WWE releases for Ruby Soho, formerly Ruby Riott, Buddy Matthews, formerly Buddy Murphy, Adam Scherr, formerly Braun Strowman, and CJ Perry, formerly Lana, have all come up to an end just yesterday. So it'll be interesting to see where all those people go as well. AEW owner Tony Khan sent out a tweet this morning, speaking of All Out as well, and said that due to travel issues, Pac versus Andrade will no longer be placing this weekend at the All Out pay-per-view, which is disappointing for me because personally that was the match I was most anticipating. Tony has said that it will take place on a future episode of Rampage. I think it was Rampage. May have been Dynamite. I'm pretty sure the tweet said Rampage anyway. But yeah, I'm greatly looking forward to that match when it eventually happens. I'm solidly definitely looking forward to All Out this weekend regardless. Sorry, that was the caffeine kicking in there, tripping over my words as per usual. The match of the week this week. I had no idea what to make as the match of the week this week, as there was actually a couple of good matches that I watched this week. If you have IWTV, definitely go out of your way to watch the Steve Corino versus Colby Corino match. Of course, Steve Corino, the king of old school, just came out of retirement, for one night only to face his son Colby. And holy shit, was it amazing. Like, just the story that they told going into it, the pacing of the actual match itself, all that went for about 50 minutes, including the match and the post-match promos, but it blew my mind. Like, I might even go watch it for a second time after I finish recording this, because I haven't got a chance to show Mrs. Crossfire just yet, but wow, yeah, it was chef's kiss. But the official match of the week this week, let's say, is Rowdy Roddy Piper versus Greg the Hammer Valentine in their infamous dog collar match at Starrcade 1983. I first saw this match when I think I was 14, maybe 15, and I was just absolutely in awe back then. So going back and rewatching it now that, I have been in the business myself and having it, fresh on my mind as well because of the Roddy Piper documentary that I mentioned at the start of this, it was just wow. Like, having Gordon Soley on commentary, who's honestly one of the best of all time behind the desk, hands down. Of course, Gordon Soley actually inspired Jim Ross, who in many ways is the best commentator of all time. In my opinion, I think he is the very best, as do a lot of other people. But yeah, between Gordon's commentary and just the build of the match itself was just absolutely magic. They had the crowd hooked from beginning right to the end. And the best part is they didn't even do anything fancy by today's standards. But boy, oh boy, did they ever go to work. Again, that match was Roddy Piper versus Greg Valentine at Starrcade 1983 in a dog collar match. Arguably still the greatest dog collar match to this day. You can watch that on the WWE Network, and I believe it is either on YouTube or Dailymotion as well. But my suggestion would be watch it on, the network, because it is the best quality. And now for the main portion of this show, where I'm doing my recap-ish of Warrior Wrestling Stadium Series Night 3, the final Stadium Series for 2021. This didn't actually end up being in the stadium due to weather issues in Chicago. It ended up taking place in the gym at the school they were in, because it's a big gym, so they were able to still social distance. And it instantly made the atmosphere so much better, in my opinion. Like, the production was actually like 10 times better because they were inside. So I'm hoping that they actually stick to the inside of the school gym, because it was really good. The ads at the start of the show were a bit glitchy, but the show itself, as I said, did have much, better production than usual due to it being inside. Match number 1. We had the Warrior Wrestling Women's Championship. We had Thunder Rosa, the challenger, versus Kylie Ray, the champion. Kylie Ray was super over as always, of course, still coming out to the Pokemon theme, the OG Pokemon theme. Still gets me pumped every time I hear it. Good old nostalgia. The match started off nice and basic. The two women were exchanging a bit of chain wrestling and pin attempts. Kylie Ray's, bow fell out of her hair, and the commentator said that she'd lost the source of her power, which popped me good. There was a lot of respect shown between the two competitors here, which is always a good story. Tiny bit of comedy thrown in there as well. Of course, Kylie Ray, smiley Kylie Ray, always, bubbly and whatever, works really well. Overall, was a slow-paced match, but the fans were there every step of the way. At some point during the match, Thunder Rosa took a fan's tobacco dip. COVID! The match could have gone either way, but Thunder Rosa picked up the win via submission with a choke. Congratulations to Thunder Rosa on becoming the new Warrior Wrestling Women's Champion. Mrs. Crossfire pointed out, just like they did on commentary, that the reason Kylie lost was because she lost her bow at the start earlier in the match, which gave me a nice little chuckle again. Match number 2, we had Cole Radrick versus Isaiah Velasquez Two super talented dudes, super indie style match, lots of flippy doos and false finish central, but it is what it is. I've been a fan of Velasquez for quite a while, but Cole Radrick is definitely low-key a guy to look out for in the near future. The two men were exchanging pins, and Radrick got the win with a head scissors pin combo. Pretty good match. Match number 3, Marco Stunt versus Jackson Crowley. Mrs. Crossfire was not a fan of the leather pig mask that Crowley wears to the ring, and I'll admit, it's pretty fucking creepy. Outside of, knowing him as the guy with the pig mask, I've not been overly familiar with Crowley, but he certainly impressed me in this match. The match was jump-started when Crowley attacked Marco Stunt, hit a suicide dive, and then a slingshot X-Factor, which Marco sold like an absolute champ. Marco's size, as per usual, was both a pro and a con for him in terms of both offense and defense. I always get concerned when Marco gets thrown around the way that he does, because sometimes it's a bit too reckless, but for the most part, it wasn't actually done too crazily in this match. Crowley did do a good job of taking care of his opponent, which is always rule number 1. The fans were solidly behind Marco, clapping his name in the style of the New Day clap. Of course, New Day rocks. They're going, Marco Stunt. Anyways, Crowley popped me when the referee was telling him off. Crowley started, moving his arms in the same fashion, as the referee was, and then he did like a little armish jig thing, which is kind of funny. There was a beautiful blue thunderbomb in here by Jackson Crowley. Marco's size, again, being an advantage to Crowley here, and obviously an advantage, just in general, because he can post better and whatever. Marco did one of the best Canadian destroyers I've actually seen in a while in this match, and that says a lot given how often they happen in professional wrestling these days. Of course, the guy taking it has a lot to do with it as well. So hats off, to Crowley, who sold it to absolute perfection. Marco Stunt would go on to win to hit, Spike Dudley's acid drop finisher, the step-up bulldog on the ropes, called the Dudley Dog in WWE. They incorrectly called it the slice bread number 2 on commentary, which is a similar but different move. It's funny because I said to Mrs. Crossfire, moments before this, that in my opinion, Marco Stunt is the modern day Spike Dudley. There's a lot of small underdog wrestlers out there, but perhaps none are more over with the fans as Marco Stunt. Maybe my boy Fuego del Sol, who did actually just get signed by AEW a few weeks ago, but his underdog stature isn't so much due to his size like Marco is. Marco eventually did get the win in this match against Jackson Crowley after hitting a beautiful 450 splash and getting the win via pinfall. Match number 4, we had Evil Uno from the Dark Order versus Jason Hotch. This was my very first time seeing Jason Hotch. I made a joke to Mrs. Crossfire about him looking like a generic creator wrestler, which people could take as an insult, but as backhanded as it may be, in this case, I kind of meant it, as a compliment, because while he looked, he's got like a basic look sort of thing, he still very much looks the part, and he has an impressive, physique to boot. The match started, with your typical Evil Uno comedy shenanigans. Jason Hotch would go on to mock Evil Uno, and did a pretty good job of it too, to be honest. They did a bit of comedy that kind of piggybacked off the earlier spot between Kylie Ray and Thunder Rosa in the first match when they had their bit of comedy, but in fairness, it's the kind of stuff that, Uno is usually known for. Uno accidentally chopped the ring post, which is a spot that almost always makes me cringe, because it's that's a broken hand, broken wrist, broken fingers, and, obviously Hotch took advantage of that, went to work on the hand, and then he did a good job of getting his shit in, if you will. We had more antics from Evil Uno that gave me a big chuckle, very Eddie Guerrero-esque, almost Three Stooges-like at time. I may be biased, but I feel like this was the best match of the night so far. Everyone that knows me knows that I love comedy wrestling, but the fans were into it. Both men strongly got their characters over throughout the match. Hotch missed a beautiful frog splash, speaking of Eddie Guerrero. It was absolutely perfect form, but eventually Uno picked up the win with a version of a pump handle flatliner. They shook hands and fist bumped after the match, which hurt both men's hands, so then they gave a high five with their feet. Again, very Three Stooge slapstick comedy, but I'm here for it. Match number 5, we had Warrior Wrestling Lucha Championship. We had Mr. Iguana, the challenger, versus RMS, the champion. I've seen a bit of Mr. Iguana here and there, but this is the first time I've seen him in a full match, and I was instantly made a fan. I need Mr. Iguana versus Mick Moretti ASAP once the world's able to actually open up. Like, whether it's here in Australia, over in the US, over in Mexico, it just needs to happen. Like, this Mr. Iguana's gimmick popped the shit out of me straight out the gate. Straight out the gate, Mr. Iguana got his character over, which threw RMS off. Being that this was a Lucha Rules match, this was fairly high-paced, with both competitors looking great, looking strong, brother. They trade high-risk moves to the floor. The fans were kind of, split between the two competitors. And just as I said that Evil Uno and, Hotch had match of the night, RMS and Mr. Iguana came out and just went absolutely nuts. Lots of high-impact and innovative moves in this one. As I said, fans were into it. RMS would go on to get the win via submission with a version of a knee bar, thus retaining his Warrior Wrestling Lucha Championship. We got a sign of respect between the two. RMS even shook hands with Mr. Iguana's hand puppet, which was great, getting Mr. Iguana's gimmick over there. The fans gave both men a standing ovation. Match number 6, we had Warhorse versus Beastman. Fans were solidly behind Warhorse as usual because he rules ass. They said on commentary that RMS was actually receiving medical attention from the match prior. Both Warhorse and Beastman did a great job as always of getting their, respective characters over. Warhorse with some high-risk offense early on, then Beastman responded in kind, doing stuff that, as a big man, he shouldn't be able to do, but that's kind of his gimmick. Warhorse hulked up, if you will, after some Beastman offense and hit a very impressive German suplex on the big man. Beastman sucked it all up, got some shit in, as they say. There was a scary spot where Beastman went for a suicide dive and his foot got stuck on the rope on the way down. Nice little splat on the floor there. The fans started to get behind Beastman with the chants of husk, husk, husk. Of course, that's Beastman's calling card, mating call, catchphrase, call it what you want. Warhorse eventually got the win after 3 top rope elbow drops. Both men put each other's jackets on out of a sign of respect in a comedic way. Nice little touch there. Warhorse was worried about Beastman, ripping his denim vest. Luckily he didn't. Thank God. Not the metal patches, brother. Match number 7, we had the GMSI, aka the Get My Shot Invitational. This is obviously a play on words of Brian Cage being Mr. GMSI, which is Get My Shit In. Brian Cage, being a former Warrior Wrestling champion, would get to hand-pick his opponents in a 6-pack challenge, where the winning man would get a shot at any championship in Warrior Wrestling, included the women's title if they want to, whenever they wanted. Kind of like, a Money in the Bank situation in WWE. In this case, it was the Warrior Wrestling Medallion. This was one fall to a finish, and we had Brian Cage, as I mentioned, versus Dante Martin, versus Alan 5 Angels, of course from the Dark Order, versus Casey Navarro, versus TJP, versus Chandler Hopkins. My first time seeing Chandler Hopkins, who actually impressed me a lot in this match as well. Very go match, much like the Lucha Rules match, and as I've said in other reviews, or recap-ish as I like to say, I still think I should put that on a shirt along with "but yeah." But as I've said in other reviews, a match like this, you kind of come into it expecting somewhat of a spot fest, and honestly, that's fine. Everyone in this match got a bit of a shine. Hey, that rhymed. Everyone in this match got a bit of a shine. Casey Navarro, Alan Angels, and Dante Martin with their displays of speed. Brian Cage, obviously, with his display of power. TJP with his technical prowess, also while being a cocky bastard. And Chandler Hopkins with a mix of speed and technique. Cage threw everyone around at some point or another. TJP and Chandler Hopkins used double team offense on Brian Cage a couple of times throughout this matchup. We had dueling submission holds at one point with Alan Angels and TJP trying to get a submission victory respectively simultaneously. Everyone in this match got a false finish at some point. All these guys honestly just had really good chemistry. And I feel like it was just a great match from start to finish, despite it, being all over the place and go, go, go. Casey Navarro would eventually get the win after hitting a running slice bread number 2, or Shiranui. Of course, Casey Navarro's trademark move there. Brian Cage would shake Casey Navarro's hand after the fact. I really hope that Casey Navarro cashes it in fair and square, because him versus Trey Miguel or Jake something respectively in a proper match would be dope as fuck. Although if I was to fantasy book it, I'd have Casey versus Aramis for the Lucha Championship. Match number 8, we had Sam Adonis versus Switchblade Jay White. Fans were solidly behind Jay White here, at least in the entrances. To each their own, I guess. Sam Adonis would actually go on to start to get some cheers as well, though. On commentary, they mentioned that Aramis had actually suffered an injury, so well wishes to Aramis. Sam Adonis hit a picture-perfect rope walk blockbuster, made it look way easier than it should have been. Switchblade would control the majority of the pace of the match. We eventually started to get dueling chants in this match, with the fans split between Adonis and Switchblade as it progressed. Adonis got a very close near fall with an excellent 450 splash, but after a version of a Regalplex and then a Blade Runner, of course, Switchblade's twisting flatliner finisher, Switchblade Jay White would get the pin and subsequently get the victory. Switchblade went to cut a promo before dropping the mic and just walking away, and then Adonis got a standing ovation after the match. So I like that Adonis has just kind of slowly turned face over the last few shows here. He's, he went, of course, he was always getting cheap heat and stuff, and he's just stopped doing that, and he's just gone out there and wrestled. So he's slowly getting fanfare. So it'll be interesting to see if he stays as a babyface, but Adonis did actually thank the Chicago fans on the mic before he left the ring. Match number 9 / the main event was the Warrior Wrestling Championship. We had Jake Something, the challenger, versus Trey Miguel, the champion. The pre-match video package that they played was very short and sweet, but very effective nonetheless. I love the fired up, almost angry side of Jake Something. And much as was the common theme throughout this event, the fans were split between both competitors. I think Trey had the slight edge with the fans, especially after Something slapped Trey's hand away when Trey tried to shake his hand at the start of the match. Jake Something obviously had the power and strength advantage, Trey Miguel with the speed and agility advantage. As always, I say, styles make matches. Trey tried to play mind games with Jake Something by kind of running around and trying to get Something to catch him, trying to burn him out, I guess, trying to use up all of Jake Something's cardio. Unfortunately for Trey, that would come back to bite him when he went for a suicide dive and Something would eventually catch him, except that it was literally in midair, and then he hit a big forearm, and moments later he would just steamroll Trey again, this time in the ring. Every time Trey would try to build momentum, it just kept happening over and over. He'd, either just swat him away or he'd catch him. Very good, big man versus little man contest. Trey obviously the underdog in this situation, despite being the reigning champion, as it should be in my opinion, with Jake Something controlling the pace as he just, tossed Trey all around the ring at his leisure. Trey Miguel hit an absolutely beautiful step-up rope-assisted somersault plancher to the floor, taking out Jake Something, which almost ended in a double countout. Trey would go on to build some offense, finally using his quickness. Trey almost got a quick win with his lightning spiral finisher, of course the modified spike Russian leg sweep that he does. Jake Something got a false finish of his own with a devastating Michinoku driver. Jake Something would kick out of Trey's other finisher in the diving Meteora, or the diving double knees, that he calls the Fresh Prince of Midair, but eventually Trey would still go on to get the win regardless via submission after an arm-trapped knee bar. Something's huge frame actually coming back to bite him there. Fantastic show all around. Definitely the best of the Stadium Series shows for this year. Kudos to everyone involved from top to bottom of the card. Warrior Wrestling have announced that they will be returning on October 16th for their Sweet 16 event. Already announced for this event is an appearance by Bret the Hitman Hart, and the former Buddy Murphy that I mentioned at the start of this podcast, now Buddy Matthews, will be making his return to the ring now that his non-compete is up. This will actually be Matthews' first announced match back since his WWE departure. I'm sure he's probably going to wrestle in the next month or so before that, but we'll see how that goes. So many guys on the Warrior Wrestling roster that I'd love to see. Buddy Face. You've got Brian Cage, Casey Navarro, TJP, Trey Miguel, Cole Radrick, just to name a few. Just have him face the entire roster. I'll do with him what everyone did with CM Punk and AEW. Just let him wrestle everyone at the same time. Have him just run the gauntlet. But no, Buddy Matthews excites me greatly that he's going to be on the indies, and hopefully he gets picked up by a major company soon, whether that be, AEW, Impact, Ring of Honor, hell, I could see him in New Japan. But that will bring me to a close for this week. As always, I appreciate your support. Please check the link tree in the description of this episode for all my social media pages, especially the Court in Conversation Facebook page. That's your best way to give me feedback, start conversation, etc., etc. The link for my Pro Wrestling Tees store is also at that link, and by the time this episode airs, Pro Wrestling Tees will actually be in the middle of a sale. I think it ends a day or two after this episode goes up, so please go check that out as well. Due to extended lockdowns in New South Wales and the ACT, ICW Australia have had to postpone Insane Asylum yet again, so please go give them a like on Facebook and a follow on Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest information on that. Once again, your song of the week for this week was Empty Cup by Citizen Soldier. Your match of the week was Roddy Piper versus Greg Valentine in the dog collar match at Starrcade 1983. I am the Essential John L. Crossfire. Happy wrestling. You were just caught in conversation.